Welcome everyone to the final forum that we've been doing this month with the Craft Council. The topic today is design solutions for an equitable and sustainable craft economy. So I just wanted to welcome everyone, and we're going to have some chance for questions afterwards. We're going to try to do some of these introductions and other things pretty quick so we can get to the questions, because last time those were sort of cut short a little bit. So I'm going to introduce Scott Pollock from the American Craft Council to say a couple of opening words. Scott?
Hey, thanks, Hrag. Thanks for doing this again, and thanks everybody for joining us for, again, as you said, Hrag, this is the final installation of our American Craft Forum, the second series that we've done. You know, as a lot of people who are joining the call or rejoining us have been able to participate in these sessions, it's just been a chance for the American Craft Council to sort of get everybody together again in this sort of strange time, you know, and we're not meeting in person, and we're not having events, and we're not hosting exhibitions, or we're not doing marketplace events. The American Craft Council is really committed to galvanizing everybody and bringing people together when and where we can. And I think that this topic today, which we're really excited about hosting, is especially important to the American Craft Council, especially as COVID hit us, you know, sort of unexpectedly shut down a lot of our operations. You know, one of the elements that the American Craft Council and services it offers to artists is opportunities for people to connect and sell their work through the American craft shows. And I think, like a lot of people, you know, we as an organization have been affected adversely, and we're trying to come up with solutions for what that's going to look like when we do return, quote unquote, in this new normal post-COVID. So today's topic's really interesting and important for us, I feel like, not just for the organization, the Craft Council, but for the field. And we're especially happy to be having conversations about additional ways artists and makers are supporting themselves and having to rethink what they're doing and how they show up, whether it's on e-commerce or collectively through organizations and brick and mortar stores and galleries, and all the way again to the craft shows and festivals that we've been so used to having at our fore. So this is going to be a great conversation, really excited about it. I do want to acknowledge all the incredible partners that have been part of the forum series, including the Critical Craft Forum. We heard from them last time. We also are really indebted to the folks at the Socially Engaged Craft Collective who've been hosting post-forum conversations on Wednesdays. And a note to everybody, the Socially Engaged Craft Collective will be hosting their own event actually next Wednesday, and you're all invited to join that conversation online. And hopefully somebody might be posting some information about that conversation. So that'll be happening next week, Wednesday as well. But we're also really indebted to the organization, the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. And I just want to go ahead and turn this over to Hallie Butman, who's the Director of Special Projects at the Smithsonian. Thanks, Hallie, for helping us out with this project.
Thanks so much, Scott. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the warm welcome. And I just want to thank American Craft Council for hosting the series. We are absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. So I just want to say welcome to all of us joining us today. It's hard to see without faces this time. The Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage is a research center that's based in Washington, D.C. We promote greater understanding and sustainability of cultural heritage across the United States and around the world through research, education, and community engagement. So like our colleagues at our museums, and many of you I expect, we are teleworking these days, and I'm talking to you from my home in Maryland. I want to acknowledge with respect the Piscataway people on whose traditional territory both the Smithsonian and I personally live. Their relationship with the land west of the Chesapeake Bay continues today. Many of you know our center for the annual Smithsonian Folklife Festival. It's an event that's taken place on the National Mall each summer for over 50 years. This year we're digital, we're not on the mall. And our team is offering a range of daily programming exploring how communities draw upon their cultural practices to address environmental challenges and adding to the national conversation about racism, intersectional discrimination, and building an equitable and just society. Rachel's going to drop a link to the programming in the chat, and I encourage all of you to check it out. We have daily programming for the next week through July 4th. Last year at the center, we launched a new cultural sustainability program. While globalization connects people across the world in new ways, we also know that it threatens the world's cultural diversity. Social, economic, and political forces like urbanization, oppression, war, genocide, climate change, and mass production of culture push for assimilation. And COVID-19 adds another layer of crisis. In the face of these challenges, communities persist in preserving and practicing their living cultural heritage, and our program aims to bolster these efforts. Artisans and makers are central to this work. Many of you met Diana and Jai at the last forum and learned about her Will to Adorn and Crafts of African Fashion programs. For the past 5 years, we've been piloting different projects working with makers in other parts of the world. In Armenia, we've supported makers to transition their practices from hobby to business through training and a new annual festival that we launched with a local partner to bring makers to the capital to sell their products to consumers in Yerevan. In China, we supported ethnic Tibetan makers with similar trainings and workshops. In these projects and more, we've learned some really important lessons. First, that local markets truly matter. From a cultural heritage perspective, objects have meaning for local communities. Strong local market connections help shield makers from instability and volatility, whether it's changing global trends or COVID-19. Second, makers must diversify their income streams. I think we all know that. Again, a lesson that's impacted makers worldwide after COVID. From participating in in-person sales events to online retail, to teaching and learning opportunities both online and off, we know that diversification builds resilience. And finally, relationships matter. As we've seen through this forum and in our own communities and even as individuals, when difficulties arise, we need people to turn to for support, guidance, and advice. We've been in dialogue about these issues with our partners and also with American Craft Council, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion as we all work to find solutions to build a more equitable and sustainable craft economy.
Great, thank you, Hallie.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Just before we start, I just want to say special thanks also to Jason Samuels, the tech guru for this event, as well as Rachel Messerich, who's moderating the chat room. And I do want to just sort of remind people that we have some really great experts. These are specialists in their field. They're a great resource, and I hope you take advantage by asking questions. And if you don't know how to do that, at the bottom of your screen, the chat room will pop up a window and you'll have an opportunity to ask a question, and we will most certainly be looking at those. So the program today, each of the 3 different segments, we'll start with a short video, and then I'll introduce the speakers, and they'll present for a few minutes, followed by some questions. And I do welcome people to ask your questions, and if I can, I'll integrate it into the conversation. And at the end, if we have some time, we'll have some general questions for everyone. So let's get started. The first topic, the question where we approach this with is, can we find resiliency in a collective approach? So we're going to start with a short video about Open Works in Baltimore, which is a maker space and a local 3D maker that are creating printing devices for splash masks and cloth mask coordination with different Baltimore-based organizations. So we'll start with that.
My name is Will Holman. I'm the Executive Director of OpenWorks, a nonprofit community makerspace located in Baltimore, Maryland. We were forced to close by government order due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We had to lay off all of our part-time staff, which is 21 folks. That was a really hard time for the space and for our community. At the same time, we've been receiving messages on social media and emails about maker efforts to create personal protective equipment using digital fabrication technology. We put a social media message out asking for printers to volunteer at home. The response went viral, and we recruited over 350 people with access to over 650 printers all over Maryland to print parts for face shields and send them to us or drop them off in our facility. And then we sanitize them, assemble them with a laser cut visor piece and an elastic band, clean them, quality control, check, package them, and distribute them. We have made 17,000 114 face shields, and we have distributed just over 16,000 of them.
And I have been assembling face shields, doing a lot of elastic cutting, and also making DIY at-home tutorials for folks that are stuck at home. Working at OpenWorks right now and working on this project has meant a lot to me. It makes me feel like I can do something during this time. It's been giving me a lot of agency and purpose.
Since our makerspace has been forced to close its doors to our community, my role has shifted a bit to focus on communicating with our community digitally and keeping our network of at-home 3D printers motivated, connected, and updated. I also keep track of who's sending in face shield parts and other donations. As we look towards wrapping this project up, I'm currently preparing rewards packages that will be mailed to all the makers who participated in helping us make this project possible. Being a part of this project makes me feel empowered and inspired. We're all regular people that have come together and been able to solve big problems.
I was brought into OpenWorks specifically for this project with the Makers Unite staff. Mostly I've been putting together all the parts and assembling them into the final product here. And I'm really grateful to be here because I'm glad that I have a good reason to put on pants and get out of bed in the morning.
What I'm currently doing as part of this project is sterilizing all of the donated parts that come through. They come from all over. So to protect the staff here in the building, we UV sanitize everything that comes in. This is our donations that have yet to be sanitized, and this is where we stack up everything that we are currently checking in. We do it in batches of 75 for the assemblers, and this project has meant a lot to me. I've been involved in disaster response my whole life, and to be able to work on a local community level in a crisis that my skills normally couldn't help with, but to still lend a hand, and my involvement has meant the world to me during all this.
So basically in this space, we're going to receive the 3D printed parts. We're going to disinfect them in alcohol, and then we're going to log them on our iPads before it goes to the rest of the building.
I have been working on laser cutting the actual visor portion of that face shield. Being able to work here, working on something tangible has given me at least something to take my mind off of things that are happening, being able to use my skills, use my knowledge to help in some sort of way.
So thank you. So first we have Katie Stanton, who's the Program and Membership Director of Urban Manufacturing Alliance, which is a national organization advocating for local manufacturing and centering maker movement in the community. So Katie, you have the floor.
Thanks so much. This is a classic moment of COVID working from home. My cat, who's been asleep all day, literally just jumped up on my desk. So if you see him, he's very friendly, and I'm sorry. I love that video. Thanks so much for sort of putting our work in that context. I am actually not based in Baltimore, but I am wearing my Made in Be More t-shirt from the Citywide Youth Development organization that's based there. So I'm just gonna take a second to share my screen with you all. Okay, just let me know if you can't see that. So again, my name is Katie Stanton. I'm Program Director for the Urban Manufacturing Alliance. UMA is a national coalition that believes making and manufacturing can create more equitable communities and neighborhoods through building wealth, through employment, ownership, and entrepreneurship. And we define making and manufacturing as anything from food to biotech to medical devices to clothing to machinery to jewelry. And it can be at a scale from in your own home all the way up to large at-scale factories. And really UMA exists to create a national ecosystem where service providers that we call practitioners can come together and learn from each other. So these practitioners are folks like economic development agencies, workforce nonprofits, makerspaces. OpenWorks is one of our members. We have lenders, retailers, community development corporations. Anyone who's supporting a manufacturing business can be a UMA member. Membership is free, and we do that really intentionally because just like the theme of this panel, the whole ethos behind UMA is collective power, and how can we work together intentionally to create more equitable and inclusive economies. So just really briefly, as an organization, we do a couple of types of work. We do collaborative research with place-based partners. We do a lot of storytelling to recast the narrative of manufacturing, to tell people what it looks like today. So it looks like more like OpenWorks than sort of your grandfather's factory. And then of course we bring people together formally in person, currently just online, but hopefully both in the future. So I just want to take another minute to kind of talk a little bit about two pieces of our work that really demonstrate the collective approach. So one on the photo on the left comes from our local branding community of practice. And so what a local brand is a Made in Baltimore, an SF Made in San Francisco, a Made in NYC. And these groups are not only building ecosystems of service providers and businesses and connecting them and creating resources, but they're also, resource providers themselves. They're creating market access, they're providing workforce training. And this piece, moving towards equitable maker ecosystems, came out of the desire to show how these local brands can even be more embedded in their communities, and what strategies these local branding organizations are taking. Then the report on the right, which is Forging Fairness, this came out of our Pathways to Patient Capital program, which is all about how do you get more flexible, creative capital in the hands of makers and manufacturers, particularly of color. So this is a group of 11 community-based lenders, so community development financial institutions or CDFIs, nonprofit lenders, and government agencies who are experimenting with, okay, how can we move from a debt framework, so only talking about loans, to a more creative approach to financing businesses, particularly those who are starting and might not have a friends and family network to rely on, all the way up to those who are looking to scale, or perhaps are even looking for venture capital or equity. And so both of these approaches, the local branding community of practice and our Pathways to Patient Capital program, are really steeped in the desire to make sure that we're bringing people together to crowdsource solutions that are actually working, that are actually embedded in the community and really responsive in order to make the maker ecosystem and manufacturing ecosystem more collaborative and more resilient. So I think that was my 2 to 3 minutes. So I'll stop sharing, and really excited to just be in conversation with you all.
Great, Katie. So I wondered if you could say a little bit about what are some of the advantages for makers to work with these different kinds of organizations. And I know when we were talking previously to this, you mentioned the Creative Business Accelerator in Pittsburgh, as well as the Mountain BizWorks in Asheville, just as examples of different kinds of organizations, and what are the advantages of working with organizations like this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everyone can, who is on this call is probably familiar with how much work it takes to actually be a maker or a craftsperson or an artisan. And so there's no reason for you to do it alone. And so these organizations, like you pointed out, the Creative Business Accelerator in Pittsburgh, or Mountain BizWorks in Asheville, North Carolina, but there are dozens and dozens. Those are just 2 great examples. So the Creative Business Accelerator really focuses on a couple of things. They provide mentorship, they provide physical space, they provide access to new markets, and there's a couple of others, but particularly for makers of color through a program they're called Origins. And so really they're becoming these hubs of information where makers and manufacturers can go to make their lives a little bit easier, whether it's around how to find a new type of capital or a shared piece of equipment. Similarly in Asheville with Mountain BizWorks, they're a CDFI, a community development financial institution, really dedicated to being a part of the community and really helping those under-resourced and undervalued businesses get the resources they need to create the, very family sustaining wage paying jobs in manufacturing.
I know that a lot of the conversation around makers is also access to lending and also different financial resources. What are the challenges and how do these organizations help?
Yeah, so we did a study a couple of years ago called The State of Urban Manufacturing. We did it in 6 different cities, Detroit, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Portland, Oregon, and Milwaukee. And I had this in my slides, but I only had 3 minutes, so I had to cut it down. But there's a chart in our Detroit city snapshot that shows of all of the respondents who answered the survey. The question was, what kind of capital have you accessed? And one of them was bank loans. And 100% of the survey respondents who identified themselves as white had tried a traditional bank loan, and 0% of Black entrepreneurs and makers of color tried. And whether that's because, they were, unbanked, and even though they had a successful business, maybe they just didn't think they had the right paperwork, or maybe they were just sort of anticipating being denied because of the historic and systemic racism that so often plagues our more traditional institutions. And so that statistic, those people, those human beings, really inspired us to create that group, Pathways to Patient Capital. And that's a group that folks like Mountain BizWorks and Build Institute in Detroit and a number, about 8 other groups are in, really trying to figure out how to lower those barriers. So maybe it's thinking about different ways to calculate risk. Maybe it's not a credit score. Maybe it's how often you've paid your cell phone bill. Maybe it's finding local champions who can sort of back up your work and back up your idea so that you have some sort of credibility or collateral, community-based collateral credibility. So those are just some ways that institutions can provide extra layers of support to makers and manufacturers looking to access capital.
And there's one question someone's asking is whether your organization tracks the models of successful craft entrepreneurs used to sustain themselves, and if there's any place that they can take a look at those. Or do you know any organization who does something like that?
To track the models that craft entrepreneurs use to sustain themselves. By that, I'm wondering if they mean, what kind of different products or diversifications or business models?
Business models.
Yeah, I think we don't track that specifically. I think our local branding organizations like Made in Baltimore, SF Made, et cetera, Seattle Made could probably speak better to that. I think a majority of them are either, LLCs or for-profits, and then some, I think a minority would probably be like B Corps or social impact groups. But I don't know that off the top of my head.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So next we're going to invite Dominic Davis and Stephen White, who are both makers and entrepreneurs and designers and the co-owners of DifferentRegard. So gentlemen, you have the floor.
Hello, how you doing? I am Stephen White, creative director and co-founder for DifferentRegard, located in the community of Mount Vernon, Baltimore. My primary role here is to design and educate and mentor, bring brand awareness to the community.
Stephen, can I ask you to turn your video on? Because I can't, it doesn't appear to me.
Sorry. Are we there? Are we there? I turned the video on. Let's see.
Yes, that's working. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, my connection just got a little wonky. But anyway, I'm Stephen White, creative director and co-founder for DifferentRegard, located in Baltimore, Maryland. We pretty much located in the community of Mount Vernon, which is in the Midtown area of Baltimore. My primary role here is to design, educate, mentor, and bring brand awareness to the company. Since 2011, DifferentRegard design and manufacture wardrobes with sustainable clothing for your personal, professional, and your social lifestyle. We are a zero waste company as well. I'm not sure if Dominic wants to introduce himself first before I go any further.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Dominic Davis, and I'm the art director and founder of DifferentRegard. I mean, as Stephen said, you know, we design and manufacture our product right in Mount Vernon, Baltimore. So traditionally we make clothing for your professional, personal, and social lifestyle. But since COVID hit, we had to pivot our operations, dealing with a lot of uncertainty as a global pandemic, and just in the fashion industry. We realized there was something that we can add to, you know, of the value that we can add is just our skills and the team that we had. So collectively, we partnered together with our local organizations such as Made in Baltimore, just other local community members. And we said, figure out what could we do to assist in this pandemic. So for the past 13, 14 weeks now, we've been manufacturing PPE where we made over 28,000 masks and counting. And we've made over about 2,000 gowns and counting. So that's how we pivot our operations so far.
Yes, that is absolutely
I
true.
think you have a slideshow you want to show them some pictures, Stephen?
I should be already running.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't see the slideshow. I'm not sure if it's visible to others.
And if you want to, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a share screen button in green. And then to select either the... once you hit that, it'll ask you what you want to share, either your whole desktop or a single window, and then you need to confirm and it should pop up.
Okay. Yeah, my apologies. Okay. Let's see.
While you're doing that, Stephen, do you mind if I ask a question to Dominic? Oh, it started. Okay, go ahead.
So, pretty much we currently have 2 different locations in Baltimore. Of course, we have a showroom, which is located right here, 825 North Charles Street. In our showroom, we actually house our all of our product that we manufacture here in our manufacturing space, which is 841 North Howard Street. Since COVID hit, of course, we have pivoted, just like a lot of other companies. We pretty much just found resilience and creating a new income stream by also, you know, making PPE to save lives. So this next slide just shows you some feature articles that we were featured in the Baltimore Sun. This was right before COVID hit. And Dominic, myself, were just, you know, be one of the youngest Black manufacturers in Baltimore. So we were just honored to see this in the Baltimore Sun featured, and it's also featured in the Washington Post. But the reason why I show this is because, you know, when this was featured, COVID hadn't hit. So we wasn't really maximizing our manufacturing to the fullest potential that we could have. I think we only had like maybe 5 people on our team at the time. And we were just producing ready to wear and custom clothing. Of course, when COVID hit, like everyone else, you know, we decided to hop on board with PPE. This right here is an image where they the Made in Baltimore organization, who has been just a great partner for DifferentRegard, featured us on a LED board. Since we were one of the operations who jumped in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, they featured our company.
We're also awarded.
Of course, this is Dominic and Steve.
I'm so sorry, Steve. I just want to conveniently note that DifferentRegard, we were also one of the companies that awarded us 2 actual city grants for manufacturing in Baltimore as well. So that's also something to be proud of.
Yes, yes, we were, and which afforded us to get more machinery, which helped us actually produce even more PPE. The numbers Dominic gave you earlier were before we got the machinery. This is some of the PPE that we create. We create this type of mask, which is made of like a copper material, antiviral, antimicrobial. We were making these, we made over 25,000 of these that were dispersed throughout the city of Baltimore and the DMV and the East Coast of the United States, actually. We also made over 5,000 of our DifferentRegard designer masks, which you'll see those as well pop up on the screen. We are now actually producing isolation gowns, Tyvek wear for hospitals, funeral homes, anyone who pretty much needs that type of PPE. DifferentRegard, we are fortunate to have a huge, diverse team. Having diversity in the workplace definitely showed us the importance of being able, being able to pivot during the time of this pandemic. Everyone's had their own personal skill set, which, it was almost like all hands on deck, which allowed us to actually create and produce all of the product that was needed. This next slide this is one of our designer masks. Since COVID hit, our online sales were flooded for masks because we were getting a lot of media and press. So we were getting maybe 60 mass orders at a time. And so we started to create our own designer mask as well, because a lot of our clientele like to look stylish when they're wearing their clothing. So we decided to incorporate fashion with PPE while playing it safe. This is some of the, just took some samples, some pictures of some of the business that we've been doing for funeral homes, churches, flower shops, gyms. We also have dedicated our showroom now to actually, highlight a section for our PPE. So this is a picture of our isolation gown and a sample of our mask that we produce. Just want to thank you for inviting us. Dominic, do you have anything else?
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Dominic. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. I would just say thank you guys for having us and just for this opportunity, absolutely, just to showcase exactly what we do, and we actually love what we're doing. Being able to, make and manufacture in the United States, in Baltimore, it just means so much. People, I spoke about this. We're recent graduates of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 SKB program, and sorry, my neighbor's dogs, if you can hear them. We spoke about people feel great when they can be a part of something. It's not just it's a community, where you can make, and you just feel great to be a part of something. So we're just honored for you guys to acknowledge us and having us here today. Thank you.
Great. So I have a couple of questions. I found I took a look at your website, and the masks are very attractive. So congratulations on those. I hope everyone checks those out. I have a question, because the pivoting is definitely something we're hearing everyone doing, including the organization I'm part of. But my question is, what were the challenges of that pivoting for you, as well as was it able to fill the hole that the pandemic created? I mean, this is the question a lot of makers are asking.
I just think, and this is Dominic, I think that just getting it done, just really sharing that vision. Initially, we created we had to think about what is our mission, what is our vision for this, and just staying true to that allowed us it continue to keep us in straight, in the right direction we need to go, I would say. It just keep us focused on, making PPE. This is actually saving people's lives. We think about that. We were like, we didn't realize, the team, like, wow, we're really essential guys, and we're putting our lives on the line, but to help other people. So I think that was really it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think since COVID-19 hit, once it hit, our showroom was completely shut down for weeks. So we were affected. 90% of our sales were gone. So when we were afforded the opportunity after doing some R&D to create PPE, that definitely helped us and bring resilience to our company.
That's great. Someone's asking where the name Different Regard comes from. So, and I've been dying to know as well.
So it means to look different. And so in French, it means regard different, you would say it. But we turned it around in English. It just made it sound, it went better off the tongue, you know, when you just put different regard. And that's what, so it means look different, but now it's different look.
And then I have a question in terms of masks in general, because I know that it's become strangely a very political issue for a lot of people, and particularly with a lot of Black men who are talking about, you know, the fact that wearing masks, sometimes there's been animosities in public spaces or people. Now, what are is there been anything that you've done or addressed in terms of making people more comfortable with masks or any of those? That's a question that we had in the chat room.
I guess it'd be a Dominic can answer his part as well. But I'm gonna say for me, that's one reason why I felt passionate about having designer masks, because the designer mask actually, you know, it gives you some sort of individuality. You know, it's fun, it's refreshing. I feel as though the designer masks are more approachable. I feel as though you may be possibly less judged with a Different Regard designer mask. So that's one of the reasons why I felt passionate about designing the designer mask.
No, to Stephen, I think your point was great. I mean, that is everything, you know, lots of times. That was what thought that we had, you know, that was like, months ago, I was like, wow, just imagine, you know, people of color, especially men, you know, wearing masks. I said, that might get a little strange. So, you know, like some strange encounters, you know. But then we talked about, like, what Stephen said, you know, just having designer masks, you know, at least, you know, because it's almost like people, like, it's wearing clothing, you know, people judge you based off first impressions or your last. And then if you look a certain way, you know, people tend not, I mean, although we don't want to look at it, we judge, but we all do at times. We're not all, I would say, just sometimes we do. So hopefully this mask helps, you know, protect, you know, take down those, let down those barriers, I would say.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I've been hearing a lot during the pandemic in general is just the ways communities have gone out to support things they believe in. And judging by your work, I imagine there has been a lot of support from the community because of what you're doing. Have there been any surprises in that, in terms of the way people have shown their support for Different Regard and the different things you're working on?
There's love over
Absolutely.
here.
I would say, go ahead, Dominic, what you say?
I said, it's all love, you know, that's his love over here,
yeah. Absolutely. I would definitely say from our Goldman Sachs community and network, they have supported a great deal. We've been supported by City of Baltimore, Diversity and Inclusion program, Made in Baltimore have supported us, the BBC, a host of our clients have supported. Lately with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, we had a ton of people reach out to us as well. To just support and feature us on different diverse pages, because a lot of people didn't know about Different Regard in Baltimore. Since we spent a lot of our years perfecting the product, we weren't marketing a lot.
Got it. And out of curiosity, how do you see the role of social media to get the message out? Because I know a lot of makers have been leaning a lot on social media in order to communicate what they do. Now, do you see that as an integral part of what you're doing, or is it, I'd just like you to talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people are grappling with that question too.
I would definitely say it's, you know, for us, is definitely an outlet to show people what we do. It also, it helps people connect with us more. A lot of people didn't know that we were creating PPE. So with social media, it helped by spreading the word that we are creating PPE, because some people may have thought we just shut down due to the city being on lockdown. But we actually shut down because we were manufacturing and producing a lot of gowns and masks. And really, we were just putting ourselves out there to focus on where the need was great. But I definitely say social media has been a great outlet for us, even for the mask, the sales of the mask. just the branding of the organization as well. Social media has impacted Different Regard, and all great. It's been all great things. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you, both of you. And the link to the website is in the chat room if anybody would like to check it out. They're really beautiful, and it's great to hear. Thanks so much, Dominic and Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're moving on to the next topic. So this topic, we're going to be starting with a short film about Carolina Textile District, which is a member governed and district network whose mission is to revitalize the American textile industry in a way that builds on local people, assets, and heritage. So we'll watch that now.
So I own a small sewing manufacturing company called SoCo, and our entire mission was to preserve the skill of sewing in our domestic manufacturing economy. And we were able to start SoCo and this beautiful Oriole mill that I'm sitting in and create some lovely product and do a lot of contract manufacturing. But we were always a very small team and knew that that was a scale that we felt comfortable in. So when we were invited into the Carolina Textile District as a partner, we were able to have a greater impact through community and through our allies. And through doing work collectively, which was really cool. The COVID-19 impact has turned us upside down in our work. We've completely turned all of our production to masks and PPE and making those products instead of the ones that we're used to making. With the Carolina Textile District, we've always been a network of manufacturers, and we've always been a community. And we've always been connecting the supply and the demand through our services. So that hasn't changed, but it's been so much more concentrated and so much more intense with this crisis among us. I think what the CTD is so great at is organizing. And so they've been able to bring this organized pool of manufacturers to the table to create a bigger supply to this overwhelming demand for PPE and for masks. So our pedestrian mask is an antimicrobial cotton poly blend, and you know that it's breathable, it's lightweight, and then we have some really great high-tech textiles that are more in our disposable line, but that really create a lot of protection. For the CTD lately, I've been acquiring textiles that are medical grade, learning about all of these different certifications for the different textiles and what's appropriate for what products. I think the hardest thing was finding the textiles that were medically appropriate. Getting those tested has been really hard. There's very few testing facilities. So doing that quickly, but also doing that thoughtfully was definitely a challenge. Well, when I started SoCo, I really did that because I wanted the skill of sewing to survive domestically. There is so much empowerment in making that we do need to preserve these skills so that we can respond when necessity strikes. I think what's really interesting about sewing is there's just so much you can do with just that one operation. But if we don't know how to do it, you know, then we can't service that food, clothing, shelter, those necessities of life. I think what has been so great is just seeing this rallying of community, which is just always willing to help and willing to show their love through their work. We've always been this small network, very intimate and values aligned. Now we're seeing that there's this greater awareness and there's this greater community feeling around helping and responding. And it's just been really rewarding.
So the topic for this section is essentially, what does participation look like? So we have Keith Reckert, who is author, editor, creative director of the Santa Fe-based International Folk Art Market, as well as he has a job that I've always aspired to, which is color forecaster as well. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that at that point. But Keith, you have the floor.
Hrag. It's really an honor to be with you all. Am I unmuted? Yes. So it's really an honor to be with you all. And I thought maybe it would be easier to tell my story in pictures rather than words. So Jason, if you could bring up that presentation. I asked for help in sharing my screen because everything I touch breaks when it comes to technology. So here it comes. Right, as Hrag mentioned, I'm creative director, volunteer creative director for the International Folk Art Market based in Santa Fe. This would have been the 17th year for the International Folk Art Market, but unfortunately it's been canceled. This means a kind of significant dent in the income of about 185 artists who come from over 50 countries. Across a 2.5-day event, the artists sell about $3.4 million in product, and they take between 80 and 90% of that home with them to actually, in many cases, help create change at home through clean water supplies, better access to healthcare. A few of the organizations have banded together to create their own healthcare insurance programs. It's a tremendous organization that really creates a huge amount of change. We're pivoting this year to some virtual formats, including auctions. Was it July 8th, I believe, is an auction of artist product and donated product, and we'll be moving towards other auctions throughout the year. In no way will this replace the income that the organization generates for artists. But we are looking really seriously at finding some way that we can be present 365 days a year instead of just 3 days a year, so that we can perhaps build a really meaningful, long-term virtual source of sales. Can we go to the next slide? All right, next slide. There we go. I'm also founder and editor of Handout magazine. Handout has been talking about the work of artists, craftspeople, and designers without any regard whatsoever for the traditional academic distinctions between those fields. I felt really early on, this is 20 years ago, that we were getting in our own way by separating those disciplines, and that we really needed to back up and dissolve the hierarchy and look at creativity, look at the value that's created, look at the way culture is harnessed and expressed and offered up freely and willingly and hopefully for exchange. So handimagazine.com is still there as a resource. I have to say we're in hiatus right now, trying to figure out how we face the future. But it's there for everybody, and a lot of artists have told us over the years that customers have found them through coverage on Handout, and that streams of commerce and aid and respect have been struck up, and that makes us very, very happy. All right, next slide. Hrag mentioned the color forecasting part. I've been so lucky to be able to work with Pantone for almost 20 years, trying to look 2 and 3 and 5 years ahead to the visual thirsts that consumers will feel. And I have to say that every chance I've had, I've been pushing for transparency, for environmental sustainability, for an embrace of the handmade as a way to broaden people's access to commerce, to success. And over the years, I have to say the environment's changed. Maybe some good has been done through all this thinking. I also wrote a book called Pantone, the 20th Century in Color, which tracks the use of color across popular culture for the 100 years of the 20th century. And I wrote that with my colleague, Leatrice Eisman. Fantastic. You can still get it. It's out of print, but you can still find it. Next slide. And this is my most recent publication. This is called True Colors, World Masters of Natural Dyes and Pigments. And this indigo cover, which is from a Miao dyer called Han Shan. This is, you all are the first group to see this. This is the cover of the revised 2nd edition, which will be coming out in September with a new chapter, and I have to admit some corrections. So I'm very excited about that. Next slide. As Hrag mentioned, I'm editor-in-chief of Table magazine, and I wanted to talk about Table magazine because we are trying to step into this difficult moment of lack of face-to-face connection, which I know really gets in the way of artists and designers and craftspeople selling their work. And we've come on this idea that every time we have a photo shoot, it's a mini craft show. And we work really hard to bring together 5, 6, 7, 8 different makers. We take over a home and we try to be super clear about the attribution, where to get those things, who makes them, why they make them, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking that there's some way for all of us here on this call to band together to create these kinds of virtual events, if you will, right? As long as people get exposure to these things and their imaginations are sparked about how to live with them, and we can provide really clear click-throughs for purchasing, we might be able to sustain some ground level of awareness and storytelling and value and maybe business too. So that's what I was really coming here to talk about, right? Stepping into the breach and finding ways for us all to support each other by creating opportunities that maybe we would have gone to the trouble before.
Great, thank you, Keith. Now, I think seeing these images, we know why you're a color forecaster, because everything's been so brilliantly colored, and people have been mentioning that in the chat room. Thank you. One of the topics we wanted to discuss for this section, and I think you're so well suited to ask, is particularly in terms of an online marketplace, because I think we're hearing more and more about online marketplace in the transition. Now, that's not necessarily, you know, an easy transition for a lot of makers. Now, what are the challenges you've seen, and what are some advice for makers you would give about moving into an online marketplace?
Yeah, well, one of the first challenges is honestly photography, right? Because unless you're a photographer, that's not necessarily your medium. I think smartphones have made a nice dent in that barrier because you can do an awful lot with a smartphone. But I would say figuring that out, working in partnership, working in barter with the photographer, somehow overcoming that first barrier so that your work is beautifully documented, it really is the first thing. And then I have to say, the other thing that is a pretty significant barrier is that act of marketing, right? Just because you build it doesn't mean people will come. So just because you have good pictures, you have good product, and you have a website, you know, you're still standing by the side of the road waiting for a car to go by. And I think really reaching out and using Instagram as a marketing tool, figuring out a way for that to stick into commerce is everybody's challenge, right? Rather than just being eye candy. Using Facebook in the same way, banding together to create these kind of events so that everybody's followings are channeled into an awareness that something special is going on. Learning how to define these special events with a time frame, so that people know they have to buy in 7 days or 5 days rather than having forever to take action. Behaving more and more like, I have to say, a retailer, turning the evil skills of retail to good to create opportunities for yourself is really important.
Oh, great. And so also in terms of, you know, dealing with accessibility issues, I mean, any advice you would give to people who are thinking about exactly what you're talking about?
And to define accessibility for me?
Well, I think accessibility could be in many things. Like, for instance, people who are visually impaired, working on screens, you know, particularly when it comes to buying and dealing with the marketplace, but then also dealing with, you know, whether it's the consumers of different technology levels, age levels, these types of things, there seems to be some challenges. And people want to be as accessible, and I'm just asking whether in terms of these sort of makers economies, because they're all different kinds of buyers, how things have maybe changed.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think that there are no super easy answers, because the first place that we all turn at this point is online, right? Because there are so many tools that are relatively low cost of entry. It is hard to get online to be anything other than what it is, right? Which is pretty much a visual medium. I would say that we're seeing on all of the things that I'm working on, the need to translate what we do into an emailable or even desktop printable and physical mailable format. for a small percentage of the people who need us, right, as an information source. Paper hasn't gone away. So if you have to channel yourself into a decent desktop printed product, then that's what you have to do in order to catch up that certain percentage of people who can't have or don't want to have the online experience. Yeah. Not a great answer, to be really honest with you, to a great question, but these are the barriers, right, of living in a more virtual world right now.
No, I think everyone's dealing with the same issue. And I just wanted to add, in our own experience, often people discount email lists and what a role that plays in terms of marketing to a core group. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there. People sometimes rely on Instagrams and the other social networks, which are great and of course useful, but email's also a great tool. I just wanted to add that. So thank you so much, Keith. Appreciate your insight. So we're going to move on to our final topic. What is the future of e-commerce post-pandemic, and what types of spaces do we expect to see artist stories and brands emerge on? So we're going to start with a small video about Maggie Thompson, focusing on how her studio practice entrepreneurial goals and her dreams have shifted recently.
My name is Maggie Thompson, and I am a textile artist currently living in St. Paul, Minnesota. In addition to my fine arts practice, I run a small knitwear business called Makwa Studio. At Makwa, I focus primarily on knitting hats and cowls, but hope to expand more to apparel. Before COVID-19, I was actually scheduled to go to Rhode in Germany to get one more certification in industrial stole knitting. I was there last fall and was really looking forward to completing my last class, but it's just delayed. During that same week, I had also gotten a phone call from my work. I work at this amazing local company focused on green cleaning. My practice was cleaning during the day and then going to studio in the afternoons and evenings to do knitwear and work on any other fine arts projects or shows that I might have coming up. So after everything started shutting down, I was hearing folks in New York talk about how there's a shortage of PPE. So I was like, all right, I'm not working, I'm just knitting. And I have a bunch of material left over in my studio. I'll start sewing masks. Alina had officially put out a call, which is our local hospital, asking folks to start sewing masks. So I started making them for friends, and then it kind of grew out of that, and other individuals had started to approach me. Being a fine artist, I was kind of responding more artistically, and I really like to take time and effort and thought into things I make. I was running out of materials. I was putting in like 14-hour days. In order to sustain this practice, I'm going to start selling these ribbon masks in efforts to sustain the work of donating them. So I came up with this model: for every ribbon mask sold, I'll be donating 2 regular cotton CDC compliant masks. Since launching the ribbon mask project, over 300 ribbon masks have been sold and 600 regular cotton donated masks have been sent out into communities. I've also been able to hire help. Jada Gray Eagle, she's a photographer and a writer, another native artist, and then my good friend Emmalin Rowe, who graduated from Rhode Island School of Design a couple years behind me in textiles. So additional volunteers, which includes my mom and a couple of her friends, have been able to really push these masks out into the communities. I feel like as a maker during this stressful time and people wanting to help, it's thinking about the skills that you have and applying them to the situation. Back in the day when, like the French settlers came and introduced ribbon to the Great Lakes tribes, they were introduced to this new material and quickly adapted it into their own clothing and culture. Everyone's learning how to adapt and survive through this pandemic. By wearing a ribbon mask, you either identify with it or you're supporting this culture, and I think it's a way for folks to connect. My hope is that folks won't feel alone and that they'll feel proud and wearing it, and that'll be able to give them some extra strength to get through this time.
Great. So I'm going to invite Vallejo Gatner to come in and talk a little bit about his work. He's the executive director of Onassis Foundation, as well as the co-founder of Hire Artists, which you can find at hireartists.org. Vallejo, floor is yours.
Thanks for having me.
You can go ahead to start.
Can you hear me? Sorry, suddenly it was just me on the screen, and it threw me. I actually wanted to talk about two different initiatives. One, the Onassis Foundation, and I think this is something that, as a presenting programming organization, we were really happy about. It's not typically a grant-making foundation in the US. It's a Greek-founded organization that was set up with the estate of Aristotle Onassis. And we've had an office and a program in New York for some decades, but have more recently been focusing on questions, thinking around, focused on a much more contemporary identity. And we had, like everybody, a suite of things that were going to be rolled out over the last 3 months and the next 6. And about 3 weeks in, one of our team, Sophia, came up with an idea that we jumped on both in Athens and New York, which was really about positively commissioning, reaching out and making things happen, and starting to interrogate what this looks like after the pandemic. Because as we've all pivoted to respond to the now, I think what was interesting is that we started asking questions about, well, what's going to change with audiences afterwards, and what's going to happen next? And critically, as an organization with resources, as all of us with organizations have, even if they're not always financial, we set out to try and figure out how best to deploy those in service of supporting artists to continue to make work, and supporting audiences to continue to engage with work. And it was really important that those two things combined. So we created the program Enter, which was a series now of upwards of 50 micro commissions of about $1,500 each, not a lot of money. The work had to be made in a very limited period of time, and it had to be made as a condition of the contract in conditions of lockdown for audiences who were the same. And the question we asked all of these artists was really to reimagine what their relationship to an audience would be, to try and move beyond the flood of documentation of performance and of art that was crashing through on so many platforms, and to start reimagining how people will engage with the idea of liveness, of interactivity, of connection, and how to find people. And I want to show a short video, if I could, of a work that goes live next week, that was created in part by Emmalin Mast and Yehuda Duenas, two Los Angeles-based artists, where they in turn commissioned 15 different LA-based artists to respond to a series of prompts, the affirmative prompts that were inspired in part by Yvonne Rainer's famous negative prompts from the 60s. So I'm going to share my screen I will, here it is. It's just, this is on Instagram at the moment, and the whole project goes live next week. I'll go full screen. Over the course of, now stop sharing the screen. There we go, thank you. Over the course of the last 3 months, writers, filmmakers, theatre makers, choreographers, performance makers of all descriptions, and non-performance makers have generated work that range from instructions to how to build a heterotopic garden in one's own space, to short films, to live theatre performances that happened remotely, Risa Puno in New York created an entirely new Dungeons and Dragons game, and so on and so on. So for us, and it was a way of trying to sustain energy and momentum, to not just curl up into the fetal position and kind of wait for it all to pass over. And of course, a way of redistributing resources to the artists around us. We also partnered with a whole bunch of institutions as well. The Chocolate Factory in Long Island City, the Queen's Museum, New Inc., the New Museum's incubator space, and others. And so that's been a really exciting program that I think, whether in large or small ways, has challenged us as an organization that's typically pretty focused on getting, you know, hundreds of people in a room together to rethink how we might sustain a relationship, both with the sort of process and production of artwork, but critically with audiences, and to try and build bridges between the two. The website for that I can post, but it is anasis.org/enter, and I will put it there in just a moment. The other project that I wanted to talk about, I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead too fast.
No, go ahead.
No, sorry. I'm going to share screen again and jump across to, hang on. Jump across to hire artists. Shortly after this happened, we of course realized, you know, just through all of our conversations, how dire the situation was for artists across the spectrum, and that this certainly wasn't simply a 3-month problem. That in the live arts anyway, work was being cancelled not just 3 months but 6 months, a year, 2 years in advance, and the work that would have built touring opportunities and co-producing opportunities down the track was all being cancelled. People literally watched hundreds of thousands of dollars go up in smoke and not to return, as I know people across so many sectors did. So with a couple of former colleagues, it was inspired initially by me trying to think about how to help a choreographer friend whose work had dried up, and she's an amazing French teacher. And it's been a long time that I should have begun learning French. So I started paying her to teach me French. I'm in a job, I'm secure, I'm fine. So I should be deploying my time and my resources to try and help. And this was a way of doing that was in fact mutually kind of incredibly beneficial. And started thinking about all the skills and all of the talents that the artists that I had worked with have, in addition to their core activity of making dance, making theatre, making performance. And so we built this website called hireartist.org, where people can offer services or skills. And again, those are delivered remotely, but there's an incredible kind of array of different kinds of things, from foraging classes, cooking lessons, music lessons, languages of all sorts, IT, video editing, script editing, acting classes, yoga, of course, writing coach, people mixing pandemic playlists, virtually DJing virtual parties in some cases. And it was a way of just trying to figure out how to create a vertical transfer of resources from those of us who have not lost their jobs, have not lost their income, have not lost their resources to those who have. And to try and do so in a way that wasn't simply, you know, a handout, as important as those have been through the funds that have been set up, but actually filled people's days, particularly in a period when there was a lot of time to fill. And increasingly, it seems to me that this could be something that continues into the future. We're not sure yet. we haven't figured it out. I think it's problematic, of course, as well. There's a danger of replicating the gig economy, which can be, which we need to be really careful of, because I think we could all agree that that's been problematic historically. So thinking about that and thinking about how to continue helping has been a really big part of the last few months of time.
Great. Leo, I have a question. Have there been any surprise successes in this hireartist.org in terms of what people are eager to buy or pay for?
What's interesting is, initially it was like, I thought, oh, I need someone to do my accounting. I need someone to teach me French. I need someone to do this. I need someone to do that. What's been interesting is that the things that people are buying are not so much, I need someone to do. It's, I really want to do. It's the stuff that is kind of out of the box, whether it's the DJ set, Sybil running on FaceTime with you as you wander around Prospect Park or Central Park, or by a river upstate, showing you which plants are edible, which have medicinal value. Lucian Zion, who runs the inimitable Lucian Zion, who runs the Invisible Dog in Brooklyn, who is a self-taught extraordinary chef, magic lessons. It's stuff that kind of, I guess, feels somehow frivolous, but at the same time feels so liberating. And that has become emotionally such a point. And also, I think the things that we're seeing succeed are the things that actually perhaps use that artistic talent that people were bringing to the work and the creative strategies that they were bringing to their work, rather than using the skill that they had from their gig job that was separate to their creative practice. And that's been kind of wonderful. It's also, it's a much harder ask. It's a much harder offer to kind of create. And I think we're seeing those kinds of offers pop up in other environments like Airbnb experiences and other places. So, it's an interesting moment as the experience economy moves into an experience that we have to have by ourselves and within a particular very defined geographic area.
One of the people in the chat room defined it, I think, pretty well. So they seem to be things that nurture the spirit. People want those right now at a time where it's sort of like we're looking for those things. So I have one last question where, of course, the time is over, of course, but just one quick question. I wanted to ask about the foundation and just in general, how it's adapted with some of the things that it's been doing in terms of micro grants or any other types of activities that just to give people a little bit of insight.
The micro grant program was a really big focus. I'm so proud actually of this organization right now. Unlike a lot of organizations, everybody who was cancelled was paid in full. Shows that we had documented, that then were re-edited, the sound was tweaked, everything was done beautifully. They were paid for us. They were paid screening rights fees for us to put it on our YouTube channel. We have been busy strategizing what the next phase of Enter will look like, which I think will hopefully be a series of more ambitious commissions that will delve even further into the kind of possibilities of interactivity and what that means. But it's really strange because from here we're watching our big venue in Greece. It can open a lot sooner than we can over here. So some of it will go back to normal, I think, much faster than we might expect, sadly, in the United States. But I think pivoting and adapting and figuring out how to create new kinds of events that are pandemic proof, perhaps. And I think the design challenge. I think we need to kind of put out a design challenge there to the world of how do we create festivals? How do we create theaters? How do we create performance spaces that are able to adapt, keep the people working in them safe, and keep the audience safe?
That's a great note to end on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So I'm just going to say thank you to everybody, and I just want to introduce Sarah Schultz for some closing remarks on behalf of the American Craft Council.
Thanks, Hrag. This was an amazing conversation, and as always, I have pages and pages of notes, and there's no way I can sort of adequately go through all of the key highlights for me. But I do want to say, when we first started this series back a few months ago, there was this sense that somehow people would refer to this moment as kind of a great pause, and that would return. And I think what's actually become really clear, and I think really, really animated in this conversation, is that we're not really looking at a pause and a return, but in fact, we're moving through, as I'm starting to understand it, this series of phases, a first response that we see when people are coming forward to respond to the moment and make PPE, a kind of reimagine of our work and how we do it. And I think as we go forward, there's going to be this really interesting moment of thinking about what it means to reemerge, you know, back into the world and what that will look like differently. And so I just want to thank everybody today for kind of touching on all of those elements. And to the people in the chat who have asked if we'll continue the forum series, I don't see how we can't. I think that idea of what we're going to reemerge into and how we're going to reimagine and reemerge is the continuation of all our work together. So my hope is that we'll all continue to gather and reimagine and reemerge into something, you know, we can't, something fabulous and new, and that what we'll carry forward is a lot of the positive change and lessons that we're seeing here, and that we don't lose them, but we carry them forward in new and really powerful ways. So I really just want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Hrag. I want to thank Hallie. I want to thank all of the speakers. It's been an incredible series. And all I can say is, you know, to be continued. And to the one last question about if ACC is imagining how it's going to reimagine its markets, absolutely. So look for the notices on that coming soon. We've been deep in these conversations as well, and want to create opportunities for craft artists and makers all over. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you to the Craft Council and everyone involved for sharing your expertise, because right now is a time where we have to share our knowledge because we're all trying to figure out ways forward. And thank you again.